Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Zaina. It's a perfect segue to what I want to cover, which is how we can, what's out there, and what role can we play to conserve, not only conserve those stories and those artifacts, but part of what the museum is about is pride in the heritage, but also renewal. How do we repurpose our heritage for contemporary purposes, right? So that we can thrust it into the future, right? And make it relevant as opposed to just an act of nostalgia. And we want it to be the fuel for the creativity of the future, right? I'll do my best to, I have 10 places I want to show you guys. I'm going to share my screen. So basically, I'm going to spend a minute on each one of them. So basically, I'm going to quickly show the Palestinian Museum's virtual tour. I'm going to talk at the end about the museum again. And then the different sources of oral history that I think that we found and we thought are useful and worth spending time on. Palestine Remembered, the Palestine Oral History Archive, Arab American Stories, Palestinians podcast. There's also an Australian one that I found, but also FOSNA, Friends of Sabil North America. They train on how to tell your narrative. They train Palestinians on how to tell their narratives. It's an amazing project. And also StoryCorps, which is an American organization. They have something that is community StoryCorps. We did that back in 2019. I'll speak about that. And then I'll just give an example of the other part of the story that I think is just as important, which is when others speak about us or tell our story and the dangers of that. And Yazan does an amazing job of the voice of the subject and how, of course, that applies to all people that have been othered by colonialism and brings the Palestinian case. And for us as Palestinians, the whole inspiration for the museum is the sense that we as Palestinians, our main challenge is that our story has been told by others, and it's high time that we had a space to tell our own stories, our own ways, right? So without further ado, I'll just quickly go through those websites, I guess. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna share this in the chat so that you have the links as we speak. And I need to stop to be able to share on the chat, okay. All panelists and attendees, yes. Oh, it didn't take all of them. Okay, I'll take this way. It took half of them. Okay. So, So the Museum of the Palestinian People was started by Bshara Nassar, who's a great guy from Bethlehem. His family. I won't go into the story. It's a nice story, but we don't have time for it, unfortunately. Now, maybe I can tell it in the Q&A. But the basic point is that he felt that when he came to DC, he felt that the museums in DC do an amazing job in really getting you in other people's worlds and in getting immersed in other people's stories. And he sensed the absence of the Palestinian story. Where am I? Where is my story, right? So back in 2014, he started what was called the Nakba Museum, and it evolved into the Museum of the Palestinian People because we wanted to, I joined in 2017 as the chair of the board, and we wanted to make it a larger conversation, not just about Nakba, but about us as a people, and the focus on the people and not just the place, because we want people to connect with people, right? We want the visitors to connect with us as human beings so that they start to care about what's happening to us. We first need to get them to care before we give them the information or getting them to want to know more about our predicament and our challenges, because if they don't care, it doesn't matter what amount of facts we throw at them, it's not going to have the same effect. But if they care, they're going to be curious, they're going to be invested in knowing why are these amazing Palestinian people who are so inspiring, why are they still suffering, why are they still not free, and they would want to support individually. So that's the ethos of the museum. Now, we were very inspired by the fact that many people loved the exhibits. They ended up in 3.5 years. They went to 50 locations in the US. And one of the a couple that visited the exhibit in New York, in Manhattan, New York, was so impressed and inspired. They said, we have this space in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., which is a very great cultural center in D.C. You can have it free of charge for 2 years. So we were really moved by this generosity. And they're not even Palestinian, they're just white American folk. But they were really inspired by how the curation touched them, right? They connected to it. So we opened the museum last year. It's a small space, it's 800 square feet, and like 90 square meters. And we had exhibits in it. I'll quickly show you something called the virtual exhibits. So I'm showing you on the website so that you know how to get there. There's the website of the museum. You go to visit, and then down the choice virtual museum. And this was, I guess, very propitious in the sense that again, another person, average American, has nothing to do with Palestine, a cartographer, geographer, a GIS expert, was inspired by the museum, and he offered to create this virtual exhibit for people who cannot come to the museum. So he created this virtual exhibit, again, free of charge. You go in and you can see the different parts, different sections, click to learn more, right? Here's an important map that we show in 1938, shows Palestine, but also shows Bible lands. It's a National Geographic map of the Holy Land. And this is what I was talking about, how our story is told by others. And we showed this at the beginning to show people that one of our main challenges is, here is a National Geographic map of 1938. And the map says Bible lands, cradle of Western civilization. So the story of the Palestinians is not only is being told by non-Palestinians, but is being told for non-Palestinian purposes. And that's a big chunk of our predicament. And that's why we need to not only regain our narrative, but to broadcast it loud and, which is very important, in ways relevant to the listeners. And that's what we try to do in the museum. I'm not gonna go through the tour, but you can go to the tour, click on different parts, and there are different sections. There's also a section of where Palestinians are today, making their mark, which is an important theme that we have, that after you see all the adversity that Palestinians have gone through, the last thing you see is, where are Palestinians now, right? And the amazing things they're doing, Edward Said, Rashid Al-Tlaib, DJ Khalid, and so on and so forth. So that's about the museum. I'm gonna maybe come back if I have a bit of time. The other website is Palestine Remembered. We found that this is the one with the most comprehensive oral histories. They have around 600, of which many are videos. And what I love about it is that it is, I can't see the chat, so if there is anything urgent, Laura, please tell me.
No worries.
Okay. If somebody's not following or something, right? What they did is that they created it, and the refugees started populating the website with images and videos and recordings. So I love this work because it's kind of like a community effort, which I think this is what we need. We need a place where we as Palestinians can exist virtually, let's say, so that we can have this conversation and not be, and transcend the geographic boundaries we have. And it's kind of the similar experience that we've had in the museum. Is we thought we were experts on Palestine and Palestinian issues. And as they say, build and they will come. After we opened the museum, we discovered so many amazing, talented Palestinians that are up to amazing things, often no good. But I mean, that was the most inspiring lesson we had. Is once, I mean, they say the Titanic was built by professionals, while Noah's Ark was built by amateurs. So we were very hesitant to start the museum because we weren't museum experts. We knew that we needed to start somewhere. And once we started, things started happening and people started coming and we started discovering. And the museum became a hub for people to meet and discover and be proud of the Palestinian heritage and do something about it. And this is a key thing also. One of our objectives in the museum is that you go into the museum. The whole point is for you to be touched and moved. And at the end, we ask you 3 questions on a board and you can write your notes. What surprised you? I forgot the second one. But the more important one, how do you see yourself as part of the story, right? We do not want people to leave the museum without a call to action, an invitation to be part of this community, because we're not only interested in the Palestinian story as, you know, Palestinians are amazing and an act of Palestinian chauvinism and like we're such an amazing people. On the contrary, we want to tell our Palestinian story, our human story, so that the visitor sees what connects us as human beings. We want it as a platform for the larger universal conversation. We want to be leaders in this universal conversation of making this world a better place, starting with the Palestinian story. So for us, the museum is not a presentation and more a conversation, right? We want it to be a start of a relationship, not the end of a relationship. And what I find great in Palestine Remembered is that it's this great resource where you can just go and browse through it and add stuff from your village your own ways, right? So each village is proud of its heritage and it decides what is or is not important. Another one is, of course, a joint project of AUB and the Institute for Palestine Studies, and I believe also the museum in Birzeit, the Palestinian Museum in Birzeit, where they have this map and you click on the map, you click on the place, and then you get all sorts of information. And if there is oral history, you'll see it there, right? And you can click on it and it says here, duration an hour, 23 minutes. Some of them are longer. So it's a great, again, these are great resources that I highly, highly recommend that you share with others. At the museum, we're trying and not succeeding very well to try to offer our services to schools and universities to offer these resources, as we know there is a demand for the Palestinian narrative. They themselves agree that we never hear Palestinian voices. So we're offering these, and of course we'd like the museum to be there as resources. So please do approach non-Palestinians in your circles and offer them those resources. Another one which I thought was very well done was Arab American Stories, which was a joint project between PBS and the Arab American Museum in Detroit. Amazing museum. Diana Abu Ali is a good friend of mine. I'm very excited that she's there. She just joined last year. And what's great about it is that they do a good job in, rather than just telling your story from where you are, they're telling it from where the visitor is, right? So it is an Arab American story. It's a Palestinian American story, right? So here is the Arab American, and some of them are Palestinians, and they include Edward Said's sister and Dina Baydallah. And that's another good example of how do you help non-Palestinians, give them a window that speaks to them, right? We had several great experiences at the museum of, you know, this African-American guy who was helping us with management issues. And when he saw the picture of, you know, the occupation, destruction, he said, oh my God, this is reminding me of Detroit. He's from Detroit. And for us is that's exactly what we want. We want you to find your own connection to this. Another young student in one of the colleges here, when he saw the images in the Nakba section of people being evacuated from their village, he said, oh my God, this reminds me of my grandmother's story. She was a refugee in Europe in the Second World War. All those personal connections to Palestine that are coming from personal experiences that make the Palestinian story something that is relevant to the person who is speaking, who is visiting, sorry. Palestinians podcast, a great initiative by our friend Nadia Abu al-Azam. I think now she's doing this completely volunteering. but they have some amazing stories. I highly recommend. One of my favorite stories is the Dubani family, a lovely story of a family that came to the US, a typical Palestinian American story that is proud of its heritage, and a lovely family. Again, she does it in a way that's very intimate. You can't but fall in love with the family. And in fact, the Dubani family are our partners here in DC. They do Zayt and Za'atar. So they come, they put Manaish and stuff in front of the museum, and that's how we lure people into the museum. And they also offer their auction. It's lovely how food can seduce people into coming. Like total strangers know nothing about Palestine. What's Palestine? Oh, this tastes good. Go in. So we use tricks like that. It was funny. I was looking for Palestine Remembered, and I got an Australian Palestine Remembered. So there are a lot of those initiatives that are out there. And that's why when I spoke with Laura, I think we really need to have, or we should really encourage some sort of repository or some sort of hub where we broadcast it so that all of these resources that are out there are somehow have one repository, and then somebody goes and organizes them, because these are so useful, because they are personal story. You cannot tell me that my story is wrong. You can argue with my argument, but you can't really argue with my narrative. And I think that's where the entry point is. But of course, they differ in quality. I try to stack them based on how good they were. Fasna, as I said, Friends of Sabir do a great job in doing these workshops for training Palestinians on how to tell their story. And I love how they bring an older person and a younger generation person, and they flesh it out and learn how to tell it. So I highly recommend you see that. The other one is StoryCorps. So StoryCorps, for those who don't know it, is, oh my God, I'm 13 minutes. I'll finish now. It's an American organization. They collect American stories, and the way they do it is it's a duo. Two people that are in relationship with each other, a parent and a child, two siblings, or husband and wife, whatever it is, and they talk about what's meaningful in their relationship. Beautiful program. It airs every Friday, and they have this specific program for communities, Asian Americans or whatever. They partner with StoryCorps, and that's what we did. We partnered with them 2 years ago, and we did recordings, I believe, of 4 Palestinian stories, including the Dubani family. They brought the grandmother, and she spoke in Arabic. She told her story in Arabic, and it was recorded in Arabic. So they have, I think, a place in Boston, in Chicago, and I think in LA, like studios, so you can walk up there and ask for a recording, and they have mobile tours. The links are with you. I highly recommend you reach out to them, because again, we should, of course, we want to share our stories with the Palestinians, but the impact is really when these stories touch American lives. One of our resident artists, Ahmedat, very talented young guy from the Haitian refugee camp, came to the US, became an artist, and he tells the story of how one of his proudest moments was there was this family that was American, again, white American family, no Palestinian heritage. They liked his piece, they bought it, and he was very proud that he managed to sell it. And then like a year later, he bumped into them and he said, oh, let's have you over for dinner. And he did, he went over and he found the painting in their living room. And he said, I couldn't be prouder. I managed to get into, my painting made it into somebody's living room, into their intimate space. This is how you bring Palestine into people's hearts. And this is what we're trying to do at the museum. Finally, what I'll say about Yazan is that, again, I shared the YouTube. He speaks about this othering, and not othering, but like the hijacking of the voice of the subject. And the main theme here, I'm going to show the picture, is that he went into the archives of National Geographic and looked at an edition of, I think, 1914 or 1938, and he discovered that the producers used a picture of this young lady, young Palestinian girl. Where is it? I can't find it. This one. He was trying to find a picture. He was trying to basically give a picture of what he thought Palestine looked like. So he had a picture of her smiling, but he didn't use that. He used this one where she's just looking down and she's very almost inanimate, right? And he said the impact of that, that Palestinians and the Orient becomes an object. And then when he looked in the archives, he discovered that there was this beautiful picture of her smiling and radiating. You can see her personality radiating from the picture that they chose not to use. And the impact on that, right? Now, he did a tour with this, and in one, I don't know where he was, a woman identified the girl and said, oh my God, this is my grandmother. And I recognize her because that's my smile, right? So, I mean, amazing things that happen when you try to, so I tell this story because that wasn't the purpose Yazan had when he went into the archives, but amazing things happen when you start from when you start from a place of passion and commitment to values. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Sure. So what you can do, definitely there are these resources. I just want to really emphasize that, again, we are not experts. It was all out of love of Palestine. And I want to emphasize, out of frustration that other stuff has not been working. And here I want to be like, show vulnerability and say, like, I'm a person who worked in NGO in Palestine, then was part of the Palestinian negotiating team, then was part of the Palestinian delegation here. And it took a young Palestinian from Bethlehem who was just a fresh graduate in business school to come to DC. I think he was like 26, to come up with this idea. And I was like, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. Of all the projects, I mean, I'm 46 now, and of all the projects I've worked in, this is the most exciting. And when he told me about the museum, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what we need to do. Of all the things we could be doing, this is it, right? So the lesson there is, it is an emergence and it is a discovery. We need to start from a place of love, a place of why we care about Palestine, and my own discovery of how I love Palestine in ways different from how my father loved Palestine. I was born and raised in Dubai and found my own Palestine. So the people that were talking about, where like Odette's challenges and stuff, it's all about coming together, starting something, and then things come together. When we started the museum, we discovered that the Ramallah Federation here in the US has been for over 5 years collecting their Ramallah people's artifacts, and they wanted to partner with us because of economies of scale. Why create 2 museums, right? So only by doing that do we discover, and now the idea is to have, we would be the hub and then we help others. There's another one in San Diego, which is the Palestine House. We help them in registering as a 501c3. So you are not alone. We are not alone. It really is not rocket science. It is just a labor of love. So I highly, and one thing I just wanted to add, comment what Laura said, which is, if you have any collections or know of any collections, please send them Laura's way so that we have one address where this stuff is. I'm a big fan of IPS. I think it's one of our the institutions that I'm proudest about that we can show off. But it makes sense also to have one contact person for all these things. Thank you very much. And I look forward to getting news about new initiatives across the globe.